Hi.
Hello.
See Jocelyn, Julia, Maria, another Julia. We have two Julias. Okay, cool. Admin. How are you ladies doing tonight?
Great. Excited.
Awesome. I think there will be more people coming in, but quick rule, we are gonna just like let this, how do I say this? Like it is more like very down to earth, and we will have like about 5-minute breakout session. Oops, here's some feedback over there. And we will let everybody to just kind of chat among each other for about 5 minutes before we actually start the introduction and then the actual panel. And then if you can, mute yourself if you are not talking, and some of the other questions that you have while we have the panel discussion, you can drop those all into the comment section or the chat, actually, yeah, the chat sections, and then I will be moderating some of those while also let a couple of our speakers, share their insights. We also will have some dedicated time for Q&A, so you can always raise your hand when we get to the Q&A session and ask your questions. Otherwise, if you have any questions along the way while we have the discussion, just drop them in. I will be moderating those as well for all of our speakers for tonight. Sounds good? All right, let me share my screen. I'm just going to, here we go. Let me know if you can see my screen. Okay. Good, all right. Welcome to the Branding Trifecta. This is the third time that Creative Women's Co is hosting this wonderful event with the Betsy Bash, which is Lauren's company. I'm gonna let Lauren speak a little bit about that and why we're actually doing the Branding Trifecta event every single year. Lauren, do you want to share just a little bit why we're doing this and then why will we keep doing this actually?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, this has quickly become one of my favorite events of the year. And I mean, I think branding is just one of those things that you constantly have to take a look at. I know that personally we redo our website at least once a year. So it's definitely a conversation that can be had year over year over year. And it's changed and gotten more interesting each year. But the reason we started this event was I pitched this idea to South by Southwest and it didn't get picked up. It got a lot of votes, but it didn't get picked up, which was fine. There was a lot of competition. But we loved the idea so much that people were like, well, just do it in Chicago. We'll come. And so we did. And so that was the beginning of this whole event. And we're 3 years in, and this is our first time to do it virtually. So a little bit different, but still a really fantastic event.
I think it's going to be fun. We'll just let the conversation flow and just make this all organic. All right. So the next thing that I definitely would love for us to do is just gonna say a quick hello. If you don't know me, my name is Arik Shurjak. I am the co-founder and chief creative officer at Sicalofia. We are a digital brand consultancy, primarily helping women in tech and women founders with their branding, design, UI, UX, as well as anything on the web. Creative Women's Co has been my community project since 2015. It's been quite an experience on its own. Obviously this year it looks completely different than what I had imagined. So definitely pivoting not really some, actually all of our programming into the virtual side. And yeah, it's been really interesting and I've met a ton of amazing women. And I feel like when you do come to our events, the biggest thing I would love for you to take away is not just, the content or anything that you learn from the event, but also like meeting these amazing women. And they all have their own stories. They all have their own struggles. And I feel like as women supporting women, I think it's our, not just responsibility, but I feel like it's in our blood to also like supporting each other, right? So I'm hoping that you can also still connect with one another. Maybe after this, connect with, any speakers or any other attendees who come today via LinkedIn, and stay connected that way and maybe see where the conversation is going to take you. So how about we actually do a 5-minute breakout session, and after that 5-minute breakout session, but I can't talk today, the 5-minute breakout sessions, we're gonna come back and then I'm gonna pass it to Lauren to do the panel discussion. Sounds good? All right, I'm gonna stop sharing for a bit and I will create breakout room for all of us. Let's see. All right, so, okay. All right. 5 minutes. I'm back. How was it?
Awesome.
Great. Fun.
never done that before. I
Oh,
didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, hi, where are you?
Well, that's good. I'm glad that you ladies had fun with it. I think I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen one more time before we're gonna get started because I have a couple of cool info to share. Give me 1 second. All right. So we definitely know who's gonna be the primary speakers tonight, and Lauren's gonna be an awesome moderator as she always been. So I love it when Lauren moderates a panel. And let's see, definitely a huge thank you for our sponsors, my company, Scalafia, and Lauren's company, the Betsy Bash, for making sure that this event is happening. Also, the giveaway partners that we have is Coco Kind, Dribble, Shupari, and Kula. Whoops. We do have some giveaways for 2 lucky attendees tonight. So I'm gonna put everybody's name on this wheelofnames.com wheel thingy that I think it's gonna be super fun later today. We're gonna find out like who's gonna be the winner, right? So yeah, you guys gonna get those goodies from our partners, and I will mail them to you. And I think now I will pass it over to Lauren for our panel discussion. Lauren, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ari. So I'm Lauren Ramsey. My company, Betsy Bash, is a digital marketing agency primarily focused on social media, but then on everything else that touches it, so emails, blogs, website updates, things like that. And the name itself came from my grandmother's. So neither one of them is named Betsy or Bash. There's no last name of that in my family. But she's a character that I created to represent some lessons that my grandmother's taught me that really guided my life and then have also helped me guide our social media strategies through the business. And those lessons are always know the etiquette of every situation you go into. And then once you're there, just be yourself, right? So if you think about social media, everybody's on Facebook, or maybe they're leaving Facebook. Everybody's on LinkedIn, right? But once you are on LinkedIn, you're competing with a lot of people. So you have to know how to stand out and how to sell your business correctly and in a way that's going to make people do the actions you want them to do. So that's a little bit about me. I'd love to hear more from our panelists about their background and their businesses as well. So I'll kick it over to Ali first.
Hey, everyone. I am Allie Lefevre, and it's so fun to be here tonight. It's really refreshing to get to connect with other humans, so yay. I am the co-founder of a branding and marketing agency named Obedient, and we call ourselves Obedient because we aim to really move against the grain in terms of traditional marketing and branding. So we are firmly and deeply rooted in fun and humor and comedy and levity. And that carries through every aspect of our business, from how we run our business internally. All of us have some sort of comedy or humor-centric background to how we engage with clients, to the type of projects we undertake and deliver. Just a big believer that for too long, marketing and branding has been very either boring and forgettable, or it has preyed on the insecurities and fears of its consumer. And we just believe that there's a better way to do it that's equally as effective and leaves everyone feeling better. And so we that is why our tagline is Fun Sells, because we believe that you can make people laugh and make people feel good and also make people remember your brand and engage with your brand and get excited by what you do. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me, and thanks for having me tonight. I'm excited to share my perspective.
Absolutely. All right, Jessica.
Allie is brilliant and her agency is fire. And I love you.
Love
So I am Jessica Zweig. I am the founder of a company called Simply Be Agency, and we are a personal branding company. So my clients are humans, not products or companies. And most of them are entrepreneurs, CEOs, founders, solopreneurs, creatives. And what we really specialize, our tagline is, your authenticity is your superpower. Ours is drawing it out of you. And so at our core, we're a branding and strategy company. We really help our clients to define their core message, how to really cut through the noise, how to be seen as a thought leader, build an expert platform through messaging, and then strategy, kind of combining core content, blogs, websites, podcast videos, plus social, plus PR. And then we're a full service ongoing management and execution company. So we actually manage the platforms of our clients to help them grow. And very similar to kind of how Allie's brand externally reflects kind of how she runs her company. I built a team of 10 full-time people. We run our staff with a lot of heart and a lot of love, and culture is everything. And I believe that team is what is the secret sauce to success. And that has been a really beautiful learning curve for me as a leader, as my company has grown. And it's really, I was saying this earlier to Maria, just quickly about the perception of personal branding and how there is a perception that it's about ego and self-promotion and vanity. And I really think that that's correct if you're doing it wrong. We really work with people who are very mission driven and just need a bigger microphone for that message, and are very service and impact driven minded. Those are our clients, and they're wonderful human beings. And that's what makes my business go round. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm super excited about tonight too.
Love it. Yes, rounds of applause for everyone. All right, so let's dive right in. So we know that branding is important, right? We're all here to learn more about branding and maybe the do's and don'ts about branding, but what are the types of results that happen when a business's brand is on point? So Allie, why don't you kick us off?
All right. So I guess I'm going to define on point a little bit. So I think that when a business is on point, it's showing up in a way that is cohesive, that is consistent, that is memorable, that is distinct and distinguished in its industry. So it's very easy to tell that this brand, whether it's personal or product services, is doing something unique and differentiated. So that you're not muddying the waters with confusing that brand with another brand or a competitor. I think it is deeply rooted in integrity, meaning that there is an alignment with the core values of the company and how they present and show up to the world. And I think that there is, again, I think it has a very strong, defined message. And so, I think there's so many other factors in terms of like how you're running a business is obviously influences, your ultimate success. But in terms of branding it, I think I'm going to derail a little bit, but I think some of the biggest missteps people take in their business is that they have a business and not really a brand. And what I mean by that is that they have a deep understanding of what they do, what they produce, what they offer, but they don't really know how to market it or message it in a way that is compelling, that is special, that is different, that makes people pay attention, that becomes an earworm, and people think about you and they talk about you and they share about you. So I think when a business becomes a brand and a brand is getting it right, then it becomes notable and people are energized by it and excited by it. And it's, again, very, very quickly, the cream rises to the top within your industry. So hopefully that's a good way to start.
Definitely. I think that's all good points. There was a quote that came to mind when you were talking, and it might not be exactly perfect, but the gist of it was, like marketing is what you tell people, but branding is what people tell you about your brand, about your company, right? Mm-hmm. So I think if you think about it through that lens as well. So Jessica, what do you have to add to that? How would you round that out? What results happen when your business's brand is on point?
All the things that Allie said.
Right. Also, kind of not nailed it, right?
double stamp that. I think so. One of my favorite quotes, speaking of quotes when it comes to marketing, is it's kind of cheeky, but I think it's a marketing quote. And it goes, your vibe will attract your tribe. And I'm a super spiritual person. And so I believe in energy, and we're all energy. That's actually science, not spirituality, but nonetheless. And when you vibrate at your own authentic frequency as a brand, unapologetically, the more you do that, the more you're going to attract that same frequency. And at that same token, you're going to repel the frequency that's not for you. The more polarizing you actually become, the better. And if people aren't resonating, that's actually like a powerful data point, as long as people are, the right people are. And so what happens when you do that, when your brand, to use your words, Lauren, on point, you attract your right audience, you attract the right clients, you attract the right consumers. And the world has changed. You don't need millions of followers or whatever anymore to make millions of dollars. You just need your right people. And a brand, I believe, is the way we effectively do that. A brand is emotional. A brand should invoke an emotional response. And we make decisions, i.e. purchasing decisions based on emotions. And so when you really unleash your authenticity, and I'll keep coming back to that, and I know it stands for people, but also for products and companies, the more you're going to magnetize your right audience. And that is how you move the needle of being not everything to everyone, but something specific to someone. I say, if you are everything to everyone, you'll be nothing to no one. That's marketing 101. And just being super unapologetic, like knowing your voice, owning it. And if not everybody likes it, that's okay. That's actually good. We have to get over that. Like, I'd rather be provocative, polarizing than likable, as long as it's in service of something ideally positive. But that's how I would say, like, when you identify a brand of being on point, it's just so clear on who it is and who it's not.
And I think
I really love that. Oh, sorry, Lauren, can I add into those? I mean, honestly, when Ali shared her thought and then Jessica just like, really defining that even further. I mean, like, yes, and yes, and yes. I keep hearing all of these and agreeing to it, because if you really notice what has happened in the world today, I mean, it used to, like, people will buy in ads and then you technically buy into your customers, right? But I think today everything has shifted dramatically. You are literally building your brand because you want the right people, just like what Jessica has mentioned, your tribe to come in to you. Therefore, like, they're going to be the one who, believe in you. They're going to follow you. They're going to buy whatever you're throwing at them, like, literally. Yeah. So thinking about, like, instead of actually just shooting for having customers, you're shooting for having an audience, not just the customers, because these are the people who's going to really follow you along, really fight for you and become the ambassador for your brand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that goes in line perfectly with what I was going to say. So it's like a perfect transition. But like, I feel like with the introduction of social media, like the veil has been unraveled. I don't know the word. You know what I mean, but I don't know the
lifted.
word. Yes, there we go, lifted. And so we're getting to see behind the scenes of these brands more and more. And where we are now is people know whether you're a brand that they want to follow or not, based on how you're showing up in the world, what messages you're putting out there, if not you're participating in certain movements. And so I think people are making those choices even easier now with as much information as we have. So whereas like, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years ago, you might not talk about politics on social media as a brand. Now that advice has changed, right? Because you want to be as authentic, because people are trying to lift up that veil and really see who you are, and if you are who they are looking for. Mm-hmm. So what kind of brands do you guys follow for inspiration? Who's like rocking your world right now? Maybe we'll start with Jessica this time.
I thought about this. So I really, like, to Ali's point, like the cohesiveness of a brand really turns me on. Like, if your visuals are consistent and like catching, and your content, and you have a deeper why. And so I personally love Create and Cultivate as a brand. Mm-hmm. I think it's a relevant one for all of us. I just spoke at their event last week or something, an online summit, but I think that, and here's the reason why I love this brand too, is they've done such a powerful job in identifying who they are for, right? They're very clearly about women empowerment, positivity, support, a lot like this group. And I've been involved in some of their community, like events, like I did an IG Live once with them in the last month or two. And their women are so kind. Like, what you see is kind of what you get. I love their visuals, their color palette, their fonts. They're very stylized, but they're also really human. And then Jacqueline Johnson, the founder, so I kind of look at like personal brands to company brands, and like, is there a cohesion between like what the CEO is about and what the company is saying? And she's very tried and true. She's very engaged with her own personal community. She wrote a book called Work Party. She used that to leverage the Create Cultivate brand. I love that as a strategy. So she's a really powerful example of like just kind of that company of like personal brand to company brand, and then the community itself also being coherent and consistent. I don't know if you're familiar with Rebecca Campbell. I actually brought this up. She's like a spiritual kind of thought leader. She's written a book called Light is the New Black. She's like from Australia. To be frank, and I'm going to be totally like, if you guys know her, don't tell her I said this. I'm not crazy about her content. Like, I think her writing is like, meh, like it's kind of like, I've heard it before. However, her visual branding is some of the best I've seen. And her audience, she's massive audience. And I'm sure she resonates clearly with lots of people, but I've never seen visual branding so powerfully utilized to really cultivate an online community the way that she has. And so, yeah, I think like visuals are really powerful. I can speak to that. I'm sure Ali and Ari can too. But I think, and we know that maybe you don't know, but we process visual data 60,000 times faster than written text. And so looks matter. Having a clear logo, color palette, font type, all of that stuff, like it really speaks to me. And so I pay attention to that. But as far as just how I think community to founder to company brand works, I think Create Cultivate's one of the best that I've seen.
Love it. Ali?
Yeah. So I guess I'll take it in a little bit different direction. I'll talk a little bit more about like brands I love or am obsessed with or have been following. I say this only not to self-promote, but we are just launched a podcast called Brandsplaining. And the whole premise of it is that we want to talk to the minds behind some of what we perceive to be the most creative, unique, differentiated, amazing brands out there right now. And so in the past 2 weeks, I've had a million conversations, and so they're very top of mind. But one, in terms of branding and marketing that I love right now and I am obsessed with, and we just talked to someone at the company, is Aviation Gin. It's Ryan Reynolds has a 40% ownership in the company. They use marketing. Their marketing is very humor centric. It's very entertaining. It's very engaging. It's very memorable. It's very lighthearted. And I just feel like right now with, the state of the world and emotions are very heavy for people, that the world needs levity more now than ever. I think it's more than just a marketing or branding tool. I really think we're marketed to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times a day. And we want things that draw out the best in who we are and that delight us and that make us smile and make us laugh and make us feel good. And I think that they've done an exceptional job of that. They are this beautiful mix of transparency and self-deprecating and tongue-in-cheek, and they're just wildly entertaining, and they're really quick and on top of really fun pop culture, zeitgeisty references. I think Halo Top, the ice cream brand, has a really delightful brand. They have a great social presence. They have really fun messaging under their lids and on their when you open their lid, they have really fun little messaging. Again, I think it's like brands with those little micro moments and ways to entertain and engage and also say who you are and what you stand for and what you care about and how do you want to be seen. And who else? Tushy is a really fun brand. It's very punny. It's very pun heavy, but they went really hard in the paint. And something I think they've done, and I think the power of, levity and humor and all of that does is you can take a topic that's very taboo and you can make it very approachable and acceptable. You can take Tushy is bidets. So that is not only is it a taboo topic, talking like bathrooms, right? But it's also something that a lot of Americans don't use. It's very popular in European and Asian culture, but they're bringing over, a newer product to market. And I think their branding really made it accessible for people because it's a phenomenal product. I have one myself. I love it. Game changer. So I think they're really great. I think Thinx, has incredible branding, and they also have a company called, they have multiple products within their company, but they have a product called Speaks, and they've addressed menstrual cycles and incontinence. And those are two very off the table topics that there's a lot of shame and embarrassment around. And what they've done is they've given it a voice. They've made it bold. They've made it unapologetic. They've made it very they've made it memorable. They've made it something that we can talk about, and they've made it accessible to people, that it's not, you shouldn't feel embarrassed. You don't have to feel ashamed. You don't have to, only like think of it as bathroom humor, because it's not. It's a very real part of people's lives. And so I look to brands a lot that have, some of my favorite are things like Tushy and Thinks, because what they do is they take a category or a product and they make it accessible for people, or they make it feel good, or they make it something that, strips away embarrassment, shame, discomfort. And I think that that's a really powerful tool. And I think, again, it's so necessary. And I think it goes beyond just branding. And it also, I think it changes the conversation around an industry. And so those are just some of the few off the top of my head that I think are so rad.
You should get Mickey on your podcast, girl.
It's funny. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, Jess.
No, Mickey, the founder of Thinks.
Yeah, we just had Kajal, who actually, she was her creative director for a long time, and
Cool.
she developed all the copy for it. So she was like instrumental in the voice and everything, but Mickey's rad. I mean, she's developed some pretty great brands. So yeah, I love that.
And I just have to second Thanks, because I purchased them 2 months ago. And so I've gone through 2 cycles, and it is a game changer.
They're amazing.
Yeah, they're lovely.
Oh, man. Ari, what about you? Which brands are you following?
Oh man, honestly, right now, many of the brands that I'm following is within the wellness space with this COVID-19 stuff. I feel like I'm looking into that direction a lot. There's this one company for multivitamin for kids. I've been waiting to find like a multivitamin that does not include sugar for my son. And it's been so hard to find it until I one day scroll down through, like all of those posts on, I think Instagram. Yeah, I think it was on Instagram. And I quickly says like, give your kid a superpower. And I was like, wait, what? And no sugar. I was like, yes, definitely. So I was just like going through their website, and I feel like it's so funny the way they actually trying to bring in this superpower language for the kids, because honestly, my son take it every day and he's like, this is my superpower. And I feel like that really helped them to stand out among other honestly multivitamins for kids. Mm-hmm. So not just like the language, I feel like Ali is really big on this. And think about like, what are the normal assumptions you typically have for a certain market or certain industry, right? And then reverse that. I think that's the way you can stand out with your brand. And I've seen a couple of other brands who also do a great job with this. I think a couple of the examples that Ali has mentioned and also Jessica has mentioned has done a wonderful job doing this. But for a lot of people, and I think for our clients too, when they ask us like, okay, how do we really need to stand out? What do we need to do? And I think the easiest thing that you can do is to maybe start from like, what are those assumptions for your industry? If you feel like a lot of people think that your industry is boring or it's like very taboo to talk about certain things, reverse it, because chances are people actually wanted to talk about it. And I think people really do want to see the bigger change in that particular industry. So yeah, hopefully that can kind of work out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. All right. Can I say one thing about that? Because I think that's such a powerful point, is that I think that is such a smart way to start to even think about your messaging, is that taking a pushback or taking a piece of criticism, and how do you extract something powerful from it? And how do you even just not reverse it, but you can either play more deeply into it. And so you can either own it more deeply in your messaging, or take a little bit of the inverse approach. But I do think it's such a powerful strategy. And someone that I think I'll use someone who everyone knows, Taylor Swift. When she came out with her Reputation album, she had been called, prior to that, she'd been called a snake. And so she used snake imagery in all of her promotional marketing, and even her stage had like a giant snake on it. So I think so that was her way of saying, I'm going to own this thing and I'm going to take my power back. And then she got to own the narrative and own the messaging and own the language. And I know that's a very extreme example. It's a very polarizing example, but I do think often folks are so concerned with like replicating people in their industry who they think have done it well. And they forget that there might be other alternatives or other approaches that can be very successful, or there might be blue oceans in terms of things people haven't tapped into because they haven't had the know-how or the guts or really the language around it. So I just wanted to jump off of that talking point, Art, because I think that was like a really nice piece that you added.
100% agree with that.
So let's talk about brand voice a little bit. So what types of questions are, at the top of your list when you're working through how to develop a brand voice? Jessica, why don't you start first?
Sure. So it's interesting because I'm a little biased because I work with people, right? And so people don't have to try for what brands have to try, which is sounding like a person, right? Mm-hmm. Sounding like a human and having like that emotional affinity. And so for us, it's really, really what we do is every single client that comes through our agency, goes through a pretty clear, like proprietary process, if you will, that we've built. And we start with the discovery session, and we dive deep, on like, yes, their business goals and who's their target market, and what are their objectives and all of sort of the quants. But we spend quite a bit of time getting into the qualitative side of who they are, their biggest failures, like what are their dreams for themselves, what's their wild, hairiest, biggest goal, and what are their self-limiting beliefs around it? How do they describe themselves in 5 words? Like, we'll ask those kinds of questions, like describe your personality. We actually also have them do an exercise as part of their homework and onboarding of asking other people that know them the best to define what's their unique value. And so we take all of that into account as like our audit and our data dump, and we really look for the nuances and we look for the synonyms, and our job is to kind of reflect back to them and articulate in a way who they are very clearly and succinctly, because I believe that branding is an exercise in clarity and people are complex. So our job is like kind of doubly hard because it's about really refining what makes them unique, and owning kind of their greatness, which is not something people in general are very comfortable doing. And so we have to put the brand voice and message together in a way that feels extremely elevated and expert and like, buyable, but also very human. And I've kind of created a matrix around that. I think that if you really want to be seen as a thought leader, you can't talk about whatever you want. I mean, I think if any brand, you're speaking of like Halo and Thinks as like examples, like they do one thing, they sell ice cream and they sell it well. And it's a specific type of ice cream, but it's ice cream. And so we've come up with sort of a formula of how we clarify humans by identifying sort of 4 pillars to their brand that they can truly own, because you can't be about everything. You're going to be, like I said, nothing and an expert of nothing. And so we choose 4. They usually sort of circle around like what they want to be seen professionally as, but then we also look at what they want to spotlight in their humanity. And, certain people are very private and they don't want to talk about their marriage or their faith, but they will talk about their passion for fitness or travel or whatever. And it makes it more unique and dynamic. And so we really try and pull together those threads. And it's really just asking questions, listening, and synthesizing it as a team, and thinking about, this person as a brand, which is all about clarity and authenticity with any brand. And that's how you cut through today. So it's sort of taking a human being and distilling it down into a packageable thing, but it really comes from, asking, I think, more emotionally driven, intuitive questions than it is like quantitative questions. That's helpful.
Sure, of course. Allie, what would you add to that?
Well, I think Jess did a great job, and definitely diving into the personal branding, but I think a lot of the same principles apply to branding a product or a service. It's so funny. I think people really, they think of their audience as like demographic data, and it's not all women 20 to 35 are the same. Not all women 40 to 65 are the same. There's a lot of nuance in between. So, we have our own process. We call it our consumer emotion strategy, that we're really trying to tap into the ideal audience, and we want to understand their psyche, and we really want to understand the way they think, the way they feel. What do they desire? What do they need to hear? What are they sick of? What are they afraid of? What are they embarrassed by? What do they think is bullshit? Sorry, swear. But like we want to understand, like, how are they emotionally resonating with a brand or product? Because ultimately what we're trying to do when we develop a brand voice is we're trying to deeply understand the audience. And now with that also goes things like we care about, you know, what's the competitive landscape? What are other people doing in the industry? Like all that standard stuff. But emotion is the key, right? So what we're trying to really understand is, okay, we want to deeply understand the audience that we're trying to reach and engage with and connect with. And when we develop a brand voice, we call it a brand personality, because we ultimately want to develop a brand that elicits and emotions and responses and reactions from the ideal audience the way that a person would. And what we do is, because we are so focused on levity and humor and fun and play and lightheartedness and cleverness and all of that, is we think of a brand in terms of someone being charismatic. So charismatic people, people are drawn to charismatic people. And that's not just because they're delightful and they're engaging and they're warm and energetic. It's because they draw out the best in you as well. So people like to be around charismatic people because it lets your light shine as well. It lets it elicits the emotions that make you feel good. And so that's ultimately what we're trying to do. So when we're developing a personality, there are a million shades of humor, fun, levity. There are a million tones and tactics you could apply to really start to shape and cultivate this brand personality. But ultimately, what we care about is what are the emotions we want to elicit from the audience? Do we want to build, do we want them to feel endeared to us? Do we want them to respect us? Do we want them to feel like a deep trust? Do we want them to feel like they get us, or we're relatable? So, and all of those things are so specific and nuanced based on the brand and the offerings and the industry. But something I will say is that I think often too, when people come in at the early startup stages and they do have a product or an offering, they often think that what they think is the thing that matters the most. And that definitely got them, their idea is so important and the way they see their business is so essential and crucial. And we want to gather all that information and data, but what matters more is what their audience and their consumers think. We care about what they're going to respond to, what they're going to react to. And so that's how we develop all of our messaging, is how is it going to matter to them? And so, but yeah, I will just again parrot that it really does all distill down to an emotional response and reaction. Even the people who swear they make very pragmatic, logical, thoughtful decisions, sure, they might deploy that as well, but they're very emotionally driven no matter what else they think. At the end of the day, it's a little bit of a gut instinct. And so we want to make sure the brands we develop, they elicit that right reaction.
Mm-hmm. And I love that viewpoint of it, making it more of a comprehensive personality and not necessarily just a voice. I think that's a phrase that should be much more popular than brand voice. Because really that's what you're building. You're not just building, a singular point of view. So Ari, how would you round that out?
Honestly, both Ali and Jessica just sum up everything so nicely. It was like, yep, I can honestly agree with all of those, which is really interesting though, because when we work with clients on anything on branding, we often work with people like Ali to define the brand voice, simply because that's just not our forte. And I think when you work with someone who really understands, like, how can you bring out that messaging out for the audience to really understand and really gets the product or gets the brand and the company, that's when you see like this full circle of things, because branding is just not about the voice. It's just not about the market. It's just not about the product or the company, right? I feel like it's like a 360 degrees thing. I feel like when you finally, create like an understanding and the clarity for your brand, I feel like it's so complex. You can use it in every single aspect for your business. You can use it for your PR. You can use it for your marketing. You can use it for sales, and prep all of your team to understand like what is the value that this company and this brand really wants to bring to the world, and what type of audience you really want to attract, and then build that relationship. So I know that's not necessarily answer your question, but I feel like it's just a full circle for me when I hear like all the branding aspects and then the brand voice and everything else in between. I feel like it's all a really complex element that you can be dived in, like we can talk about it all night, but I feel like you have other questions too, Lauren.
Sure. And I think one thing I will add is that it doesn't change that much when you're trying to create like a mascot for your brand, right? Because you still have to create a whole character for that character. That character has to be a person, right? And so we had to create the values and morals and ethics of Betsy Bash before we could start speaking as Betsy Bash. So I don't know, I've had one more thought to add on that, but it's lost.
If I can just add something to that,
Yeah.
Lauren, because you touched on it and so did Ari, and I want to just like double click into it. So this word values like keeps standing out to me, right? What do you stand for? What are you against? And being unapologetic about that. I had Danielle Canty today on my podcast. She's the founder of Boss Babe. Do you guys know the Boss Babe Network? And she's amazing. And she was talking about how they built that brand, and their vision and their voice, their brand personality was a woman who was very open about how ambitious she was, right? That she was like wanting to succeed and make money and like crush it and be a boss. And that wasn't, again, back to what I said earlier, is that's not for everybody, but that's for a certain type of woman. And yet she was like, but we also have in our core values as a brand, the word considerate. So like, while we want to succeed, we also are kind, and we're never going to step on anyone else to do it. And we talked a lot about how the power of values can impact like company culture and a staff and all of the things. And the same goes for a brand, and really knowing, what you want to impact. Like Thinks and Tushy are such like the fact that they want to shine light on a taboo topic to make it less weird and to empower conversations that are had behind closed doors. Like that's an empowerment value, right? And so really adding that layer, I think really does connect and takes that brand personality that much further. So I just wanted to highlight that because I think it's a really good point you both brought up.
Yeah, and I think that just reiterates why it's so important to do this work up front, right? Or really think deeply about it when you are doing it. Or you might not want to set aside 5 hours to do this, but oh man, once you do, so many decisions will be made for you in the future, because you're like, I know where I stand on this, or I know how I'm going to respond to that, right? So it's really important to do the work. Okay, so kind of speaking on values, how do you decide on a company's guiding principles? Is it only a reflection of the owner? Can the owner have different views than the company? Maybe Ali, you can kick us off on this one.
Yeah. Well, I will have to say that we definitely are leaning into the founder or leadership to understand what are their core company values when we are developing the creative elements of their brand. But I guess I'll just speak to my own company and my own perspective. I don't see how someone could run a company and employ people at a company and their values are misaligned with a brand. I just don't know how you can have an integral product or integral brand or preach quality or inclusivity or progression or whatever, or, whatever that is, whatever your end result is that you're hoping to achieve and create and develop with your product or service. I just don't know how you can have someone in leadership and really steering the ship and be misaligned. So I know, again, I'm working with companies and products, and I guess I'll just speak to personal experience. We since we focus on a specific type of marketing and branding, right? I think we draw in a certain type of person, and we draw in people who are very committed to being kind and positive and delightful and all of those things. But every once in a while, someone can slip through the cracks, and you can see a big misalignment between what they're trying to market and what they say they are and what they want to put out into the world and who they are behind the scenes. And I will speak to a personal experience earlier this year. We landed a big client before COVID hit. We were very excited by it. The project kicked off, and the founder ended up being very, very misaligned with the brand. Very toxic, very cruel, very, I think, verbally abusive. And we very quickly stepped back from that project because we can't brand something that is a facade. We're not going to, within our own integrity, and no creative ability could turn this thing that was an awesome product into something wonderful and memorable and exciting and engaging when it's rooted deeply in a very toxic, problematic perspective. And that was the person who was in leadership, and that was the person who was overseeing decisions. And so, you know, I think that, so to answer your question, I do think it matters a lot who is in leadership at the company. And I think their values, you know, for better or worse, they trickle into the values of the brand. And so I think people have to be very wary and very cautious about who they're bringing into their teams and who they're aligning with, and making sure that it's integral across the board, because I always think the cracks in the armor will reveal themselves. And so, yeah, I don't think you can have one without the other. I think you can create success, and you can probably make money and sell a product, but are you going to have a good, strong, long-term brand that people are energized by and proud of? No, I don't think that.
Yeah. And I'm sure Jessica would agree there.
I could not agree with you more, Allie. You speak to, I think, what, in my personal opinion, is the Achilles heel of authenticity when it comes to branding oneself, whether it's a company or a person, because at the end of the day, it's all being run by people. And it's the integration of who you say you are on the internet and who you really are in a small room. And unfortunately, not everybody is as integrated as you would expect. And I think that goes not just for clients I'm sure you've worked with, but like I have found that I've learned some hard knocks lessons with my staff. Like, and to your question, Lauren, about, where does culture come from? Like, does it come from the founder? I will say that I'll speak to my company experience. Like, I was very clear. I had a corporate job for 2 years before I started this business. And there were core values at that company. And it was my sort of first introduction to that concept. And I was like, great. They were a poster on a wall that meant nothing. And everyone couldn't define them, didn't live them. It was bullshit. And I decided I was going to make my company founded on core values. They were going to mean everything. They weren't just going to mean something. They were going to mean everything. And I erected them at the top of Simply Be's journey. But I also did quite a few like team building sessions where we kind of co-created the values. And I have some like cultural co-founders. Some, my staff have been with me since day one. And so much of that's been inspired by them. But I will say that I kind of have this, and this is more about like leadership and how do you kind of navigate, who's a culture fit and living your values. I used to have this theory when it came to identifying your right team that went like this. If you went to a good school and you can read and write, I can teach you how to do anything. I can teach you MailChimp. I can teach you a software. I can teach you a skill, but I can't teach you ambition. You either have that in your fire in your belly or you don't. And that was like the end of the sentence. And now I have same sentence. I just added on, and I cannot give you character and integrity. And I just can't, because I've had the most ambitious, talented people in my company that lacked that. And so I think values kind of needs to come from the top. I mean, it's like it's your gatekeep. It's like how people can't walk into your company with dirty feet. Mm-hmm. And I think that if you're promoting a brand that is different than what's really internal, it's really about becoming conscious of that. And then Allie, to Allie's point, like having such a strong value moral compass as a company that you attract those right clients. And sometimes they do slip through the cracks. So do, staff members that you thought weren't in their integrity or whatever. That's just business. But I think it really does come back to that. It's about like conscious business, which I think is the future. And it starts with just having your own North Star, and however you get there doesn't, in my opinion, matter as long as you get there.
Yeah. And, and I think talking about the chinks in the armor, right? I mean, people can figure it out. Even if you're a small business, if you're networking, you're talking to people, word gets around. What about Ari? Do you have anything to add? Oh, go.
That is totally true. I feel like, when you have, your integrity is definitely on the line, and then words gets around. I think that is the way you want to build not just your business and your brand, but also like, your future self, right? I mean, you definitely don't want to burn bridges and all that different things. But going back to what Jessica had mentioned earlier, when you actually are building this like core values for your company and then slowly trying to build your own team, you'll attract the right people. And you'll notice like when all of these like applicants coming in, you'll notice like, oh, this is not a good fit for me, simply because you don't see that passion. Just like what Jessica mentioned, you can teach anyone to do any, tools. Those are just tools, literally, right? And even recently I had to hire another designer to help me with a lot of the things with our design team. I have two great applicants. One is the senior UX, UI UX, and the other one is actually a junior UI UX. But the senior UI UX, I could not imagine myself to work with him simply because he doesn't have that passion to grow, and he doesn't really show like the ambitions. He doesn't really know like where he wants to go in the next 5 years. So I feel like for me, that is important, because I need to know like, where do you see yourself? I need a plan, right? I feel like if you're like me and you have this like specific ideas and goals that you have for your companies, you want to understand like, how can you best support this person and how can they support you in this journey together? So yeah, just that.
Absolutely.
You guys, can I jump in and say one thing? Because I think we're going to move away from this, and I think just want to flag it for people who are starting their entrepreneurial journey or maybe early on. And I'm sure Jess could speak to this too, and Ari and Lauren, all you guys. But I think entrepreneurship is definitely the race of the tortoise and not the hare. It takes time to build a reputation and a brand, and I think it's really important people remember that. I think we're all like, I think we've seen so many courses and programs that promise to make you an expert overnight, and 10 tips to learn X, and I can help you DIY your brand. And there's all these like really quick hits, and it takes time, it takes effort, it takes a deep understanding of who you are and what you stand for. It takes, sometimes it takes bringing in outside talent who are better at things than you are. I mean, myself included, I have a very specific skill set. I'm really good at that, but I'm not good at everything in my business. So I bring in people who are more talented than me in other areas and aspects of it. And I just say that because I think it's so easy to get caught up in like the social experience of like, that brand launched 2 weeks ago and they have 40,000 followers. Like, come on, people, we know they're purchased. Like, right. So don't get caught up. Like it's easy to get caught up in some of those perceptions, but I really believe that the biggest strength that you can have as a brand is being consistent. And I think that's where a lot of people fail. I think that's when a lot of businesses go under, is they're not willing to put in the work every single day. They're not willing to keep putting out content every single day. They're not willing to pivot. You have to be willing to pivot and be flexible. And more than anything, and I will stand on the highest soapbox possible, is like, you have to maintain your integrity and character, like what everyone else has been saying, because if that takes a hit, it's just lifetimes in order to rebuild that. And if people think you're shady and you're shisty and you're problematic, and the word gets out very quickly. And so like, be willing to put in the work, be willing to not do shortcuts, be willing to invest in your business in the right way, be willing to make little micro mistakes and pivot and be flexible, be willing to stay in your lane and not get caught up in all the shiny objects of what everyone else is doing and what their copy looks like and what their color palette is, because you got to stay in your own lane, and you got to stay in a lane that has, it's deeply original, it's deeply rooted in integrity. And yeah, that's it. I'm sweating. I'm literally sweating.
Oh my gosh, don't sweat. You're fine. No, that was perfect. And I think I was thinking about one thing I wanted to add that you were saying that. Why do my thoughts always lead me right when the camera's on me? It'll come back to me. All right, so we've been talking a lot about branding from a brand wide perspective, a company perspective, or you're as a person, you're the brand, right? But what about these characters, right? So we've got, Mickey Mouse, Mr. Clean, Mr. Peanut, rest in peace. Right. So are there any kind of guidelines or design elements or additional morals that you take into consideration when you're creating a character for your brand versus just a brand? Or is it the same? And Jessica, I'll kick this one off to you first.
Well, it's funny. So because we're working with people, so they are their characters.
Right.
But it's a great question. Couple points that I'd like to make. So I used to run a business called Cheeky Chicago. We were an online magazine for women in the city of Chicago for 7 years. So if you're around 2008 through 2014, you might remember us, but it's been a minute. But we had a little character, and her name was Cece. Cheeky Chicago was our name, so we nicknamed her Cece, and she had a dog named Winston, named after diamonds, since they're a girl's best friend. And like, we really brought her to life. And she we promoted events, we promoted partnerships, and so we got to like dress her up and, you know, really kind of associate this like icon, like girl, you know, with the message of Cheeky, which I haven't really done in a minute. And I think like it would be so much fun to work on. And I do think, flashing back, there was a lot of critical thought that we had into like painting this picture. She wasn't just like a cute little like doll looking girl, which she was, but she had so much depth based on how we positioned her. One thing that I will say now in my, you know, current business, I have a creative director, Alexa, you know, Allie, and she's amazing. And she does all of our logos and all of our graphic design. And what she does, back to sort of that intuitive listening when it comes to building brands, same goes for visual brands, and she calls them Easter eggs. So like she hides little Easter eggs in the logos and like the visual iconography of our clients' visual branding. We had this one client that is a meditation teacher, and in her like mood board exploration, which is kind of like a Pinterest board exploration of a bunch of images, she really fell in love with this like crystal kind of agate picture of a green crystal. And so Alexa made that like a part of the icon. She created it and designed it originally, but it was like it represented brainwaves from meditation. And it was also sort of a spin on like this crystal, which was very spiritual and like on brand for this client. And so I always love Alexa, like my creative director's approach to telling a deeper story that, yeah, has meaning for the client, of course, but also can tell a more in-depth story to a prospective customer or client. It's all very, very intentional, and that work, for whatever it's worth, will take, you know, guys, like months to make. It's so much more complex than people think, in the best way. And so it's different than like characters, but it's still that same intentionality that, you know, you have to take in all parts of branding. But I should probably make icons and characters again. That'd be really
Yeah, it sounds like you had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, totally. It's so fun.
So what would you add to that, Allie?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit to the visual branding that Jess just mentioned, and then I'll tell you guys about a character we have for our agency. But yeah, I parrot everything Jess said about the visual experience. When we are developing brand personality, like for us, we think of it as both the verbal and visual experience of your brand, because various colors tell a story, certain fonts tell a story, the way you play with weight and in fonts and typography tell a story, patterns and textures tell a story, and they can either make or break a brand. You do latch on to the visual experience before, or like a hair before you dig into the copy or the messaging. And so it's really important that the visual design of your brand enhances your message so people pay attention and want to read it. You know, it's funny, when we first started our agency, we used to only do messaging. And then we were so sick and tired of handing over copy to a terrible design, because we'd see it executed and we'd go, that's supposed to be bolded. That's not supposed to be right justified. Why is that in cursive? And like, it would be this really strong, powerful, bold message, and it'd be in script font and lavender and sage green, and it would just drag the whole thing down. It's like, no one's going to read it, and they're not going to read it the way it's intended, because the visual doesn't just support the verbal. Mm-hmm. So I echo that. That's all incredibly important. I'll tell you, it's just something really funny, I think, that we did for our agency. So we are always trying to buck tradition in terms of how we approach marketing and branding. And so when Lindsay, my co-founder, and I were thinking about how to send out marketing emails on behalf of our own agency, there's a lot of, different approaches. And we're like, what if we created a character, this guy named Gary, and what if we said that he was in his 60s, an older guy, and he was a private investigator from a competitor investigating Obedient. And so we had a 7-part email series that came out that was from his perspective, and it was telling our email subscribers, all about the various things happening in our agency, but it was done through the lens of this private investigator spying on our agency. And the way, so we're talking about, oh, now they do design, or, oh, they just had this work with this client. And so it was our fun way to do a sales message that was different and unique, and that didn't put us at the center of the story entirely, and developed this really fun character voice. And it was a totally different voice than we normally use for our agency. And we developed we have such a deep understanding of this guy. He's been divorced twice. He's got a pet cockatiel. He's got a stepson that doesn't really like him too much. And it's like this delightful, he's kind of, think of him as like a little bit more bumbling variation of like The Office's Michael Scott. Anyway, so at the end of the 7-part series, what we ended up doing is saying that Gary loved spying on obedience so much that he asked if we could hire him as an intern. So now Gary is now still part of our company, and he is our forever intern. So he makes all the big announcements on behalf of our agency. We had him on our website for a really long time, and we might put him back because I miss him. And so yeah, we developed this whole character, and it was so fun because it allowed us to like take ourselves, like we didn't feel like we were selling or pitching, because we had this like really delightful, wonderful, dorky man that was doing it on our behalf. And he has become this like treasure in our agency. We talk about him like he's a real human. We have a whole Slack channel dedicated to what we think he would do and his hobbies. And anyway, so I just share that because I think sometimes what, maybe I think it's like you have to figure it out when it comes to a personal brand, but like if you do have a product or a service, there could be a fun way to play with like a character so that you can reveal certain parts of your business, or you can talk about certain aspects that maybe you personally would feel too uncomfortable to do, but there's something about putting it in the voice of someone else that you could just have a free for all. And so, yeah, just share that because we still use Gary. He's still with Obedient. And really funny, we had found this, sorry, not to go too tangential. We had found so we had this picture that we found on like a Shutterfly. That was what we used as a picture of Gary. And then we ended up wanting to continue using him. So we're like, we have to find more photos of Gary. So we reached out to the photographer who took this stock image, and he sent us about 1,500 photos of this guy. So we have a whole arsenal of Gary, and he's just a dream. So anyway, he now does when you opt into Obedience newsletter, Gary is the one who welcomes you to our agency through like a 5-part email series. So there's a lot of fun you can have with like creating mascots or characters, and yeah.
And I like that he's not like a fundamental element of like the name of your company, right? Like, so Betsy Bash is like a little mascot, but she's like everything. But it's fun to have this like side character that like pops in and out to say hello.
Yeah, he does.
I love it. So Ari, how are we on time? I feel like we're getting pretty close to Q&A.
Yes. So I think we should probably open up Q&A. I start seeing a couple of people already drop in their questions. Would you want me to just like start the questions that were pretty much dropped in here already?
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Okay, so I'll just start from the bottom, and then I'll make my way up. So a question from Maria. Is personal branding an essential part of the company branding? Does the owner have to be a public person?
I'm assuming this is for me.
Take it away.
Not necessarily, right? I mean, it is such a personal choice. I think, I think it depends on the objectives. I find that, companies, especially bigger companies that are willing and able to sort of put their leadership out into the forefront as a part of the like perception, it's like perception marketing. And so we do business with people. I say that all the time. Like, yes, we're going to buy a product. There's B2C, B2B, but it's also like people to people. And at the end of the day, if you buy a product, call a customer service line, like you're going to talk to a human. And so I think that starts at the top, like how your people, we were saying this earlier, how your people are going to sort of speak about your company comes from the people leading your company. And that typically starts with the CEO or the founder and their vision and their energy. And so if you can kind of package that, I think it's never going to hurt you as long as you do it intentionally and with integrity. But I certainly, it's such a personal choice to put yourself
Yeah.
out there and to be seen, you know, in public. And that's not for everyone. And you can still have a very successful product. Like, I don't know, like, I think I'll just harken back to what Allie brought up, like Thinks. I know the founder. I mean, she really puts herself out there, and I could tell you a lot about her. But like Halo Top, I couldn't tell you who the founder of that company is. It's all about the product, and they're killing it. And so I just think it really does depend on, you know, who your clients are and what your objectives are professionally and personally. But I will say that I don't think I've ever seen it, when you're doing personal branding right, I don't think I've ever seen it hurt a company. I've only seen it enhance a company. So I hope that answers the question. It's a great question.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I'll move on to the next question. Question for the panelists from Maria. Do you ever get this from your family and friends? But what do you actually do for your clients? Nice one.
I feel like anyone who's in communications gets that question. Is it just me?
Totally.
No, it's not just you, Maria. Well, it's,
Yep.
it's funny. We always joke around, Lindsay and I always go, I wish we were attorneys or wish we were doctors. Like, it's so much easier because, like, you know, for me, I'm like, I run a branding and marketing agency. And then my family is like, well, what is branding and marketing? And then I have to go, well, you know, when you walk through a store and you see products and they have labels and they have words on them and they have slogans and then you have to go, and then I'm like, but we do it with humor and fun. So it's like a multi-tier process to explain it. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it's definitely like, I think I've been able to tighten it over the years, but, I just feel like there's sometimes certain generations, or at least my family in particular, that are so far removed. They're entrepreneurs, but like a hairdresser, barber, like, you know, they are digital. They aren't working digitally or like creating in that way. And I always like, I laugh and I always go, well, the easiest way to put it is I get paid to pull things out of my brain. I don't really know. Like, I don't know. That's the easiest way I can distill it down. It's just, yeah. So I feel your pain.
I feel like you hit it better than how I explain it to my parents because my parents are very traditional, and I think for them to just like see me working in front of the computer is something super new for them. They're all in Bali, and all they know is all about tourism. Whenever my parents ask, so my dad would ask me someday, and he would ask me, Ari, what do you really do? It's like, well, Dad, I make something in the computer, and it's something that you will see like on the store. It will be a logo or it will be in a website. And then he would ask me again, it's like, but what is a website? I was like, I do not have time to explain this to you right now, but you'll get it someday. Someday you will.
I know, I always say, like, I wish we were in an industry that was like, you could time lapse what we do and it would be an interesting thing to watch. But I'm like, we just write a lot. We move things around a screen a lot. We're in meetings a lot. It's not like making a song, you know?
Okay, I'll move on to the other question from Jocelyn. What are some concrete exercises to go through when developing a brand? Example, list assumptions and reverse it, list your values. Is there any other?
I can speak to this. We used to run this workshop called Laugh Lab. And essentially it was a bit of an intro to using fun and humor and like just developing a personality for your brand. And we used to do an exercise called Insult Yourself. And I talked about it a little bit earlier, but we used to say, hey, write down either the biggest criticisms and insults your brand has received, or that you think they could receive, or maybe some of your own fears or concerns that your audience might have. And then again, like we say, okay, once you have that all written down, I know it's tough to look at, right? But strip some of the fear out, and then like, what are your it's a longer process exercise, but then start to think of like how you would, what would be your rebuttal and your response? Like, how would you push back on that? What would be your clapback or your pushback, or what would be your rebuttal? So I think it's a way for people to start to more deeply understand your brand by getting a little bit more comfortable with what the criticisms or reactions could be, and then learning how to have a very powerful response, because you could start to use those responses written in a cheekier, more delightful, playful way in your messaging, you can get ahead of some of that criticism. So, like for example, we, as an agency, we aren't full service in a sense that we don't do tip to tail. We are very deeply rooted in creative. So we say right away, we don't do it all. We don't want to do it all. If you want, there's a lot of people that say they do everything. What we know what we do is we do this specific thing really, really, really well. So that's our way of not concerning ourselves with feedback that we have received or that we might receive that says, hey, why don't you guys do XYZ for me? So I think it's just a way to more deeply explore your brand and start to get ahead of some of that. And I think you start to, again, more deeply understand who you are and who you're not. I can send you guys like a little Google Doc link to the exercise because I'm probably not doing it justice explaining it, but it could be helpful to just walk through.
I want to add to that.
Absolutely
Just
great.
triggered a memory of one of the things I wanted to say earlier. But I think, as you're a business owner, and Jessica mentioned this a little bit, like you learn these lessons, right? And you get better, and that just gives you another reason to like dig into your branding again. Like now that I've learned these 5 things about myself, right? About how I want to run this company or about my teammates and how they want to work, then how do you rebrand so that everybody understands it and you can attract the right customers to you?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just add, I mean, it's not a direct hit to the question, but I often say that your business will expand to the extent of which you expand as a person. Mm-hmm. And so this conversation of like personal development, personal growth, I believe like can't not exist when you're talking about success. So for whatever that's worth, I just think it's a critical piece of a brand strategy because you're ever evolving, and you really do have to know your shadows as much as your strengths, and being able to articulate both and own both makes you that much more authentic.
I agree. Last question, and then we're gonna go to the giveaway. How do you recommend scaling down a brand for a small business?
So can I give a little context really quickly?
Please.
I work with mainly small businesses, and so and I execute on their digital, and rarely do they truly have a brand. So I'm kind of sort of creating one as I go. Is there just a high level? I mean, I've been doing this, so I know what I do, but I'd love to hear from you guys from a high level, 1, 2, 3 things that you can ask an owner before I just start kind of creating their brand for them.
I mean, I think it would be a lot. I don't know if it'd be 3 things, but I know for sure one of the things that I would do is ask all those personality questions to understand who they are as a person and how they see the values of their business. But I feel like we kind of touched on that already, so I'm not sure if that's a new answer for you.
I have maybe something different to add to that. I mean, it's great, but I would just, I mean, like boundaries and expectations are magic. And so like, how much money do you have? How much time do you expect me to give to you? What are your expectations of what you think can be accomplished in that time frame? And if you can't afford it, and if I'm not going to be able to achieve your expectations, then this isn't a fit. And I have found that more and more of like my clarity of like who my core client is and the energetic alignment of, if they're right, like it's kind of that expression, if it's not a hell yes for the client, it's a hell no. And I don't like to work with people who kind of like dilly-dally and operate from scarcity. It's just like energy that like impacts me. And so I think just asking really clear upfront questions and knowing that like not every client is for you. And I know you know that. We talked at the breakout. I know you have quite a bit of clients, and I think you could probably like cut down the quantity and like increase your pricing and draw some boundaries around it. And like, so you're scaling down, but you're actually scaling up in a way that's far more serving and fulfilling for you.
Yeah, that's great advice. That resonates. That's my 2021. So
Yeah. I just echo everything you both said. I really do. Yeah. I think that what Jess just said about, I think pricing is a big piece. I mean, that's not the only piece. There's so many layers, but like, I do think that it's, when you can get there, it's better to take on a few really committed, high quality, engaged clients who have a budget, who are willing to invest, than to get caught up in just all the folks who are going to nickel and dime you to death because they're going to suck your energy. They're going to take up your time. They're not really invested because there's a lot of scarcity, which I get. I'm empathetic because especially right now, it's a tough time. It's there's a lot of people really hurting and struggling. So I don't say this callously or flippantly, but I do think like long-term, for a business strategy, you do want to start to draw in the folks who are ready to invest in a lot of ways, monetarily and also emotionally and time wise. So I think that's important to understand. I also think to everyone's point, I think understanding like what's the goals, what's driving this is really important because, I can't tell you how many people will go through our intake process and they're like, make me go viral. I'm like, okay, that's not how it works, but great. Yeah. So it's like, but that's like all they want. They want that quick hit. They want that big boom. And like, that's a very different client than someone who's willing to really look through all the aspects of their brand and create it in a consistent, cohesive, long-term A/B test, all that. So, I think really deeply understanding whoever your contact is at that company and like what are their drivers, their motivations, their needs, their wants, what they care about, with their budget, like all of that. It's like go whole hog on a document and like write out everything that you think you would need to know about someone in order to have a good relationship with them and to be on the same page. And I think that start to translate into intake questions.
Yeah. I can also add, this is such a good question. I'm so opinionated.
It is. Yeah, it's great.
And this is my dog. I hope she's allowed to join. She's we'll get our ticket next time. So the thing about clients I've learned, like the ones that pay you the most are like the least high maintenance. And the ones that pay you the least are the most high maintenance. I'm sure everyone can resonate with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also, to what Ali just said, like kind of have like your like rally cry, like a statement, like something that you really own when you're engaging with people at the upfront. Like I am very straightforward. It's like, if you want to be an Instagram influencer, I'm not the company for you. There are a lot of other agencies out there that will gladly take your money for that. I don't really say that, but I'm like, we're like not in the business of making you famous on the internet as a personal brand. We're here to build a platform that is of service. And I'm very, very straightforward about that in the beginning. And I set expectations that like, it takes a long time to build an expert platform. It's not going to happen in 3 months. It's not probably going to even happen in 6 months. It takes the time for it to compound. And so I would just get really clear, like Ali just said, like write that document out. Like what are the things that you are really going to stand behind? Because that'll weed out a lot of the fluff and the fat from your client list. And you will scale down, but you'll probably make more money.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the one thing I do want to add though, is I have actually discovered what I think is a market demand, maybe right below the types of clients that you all may have and right above like the little guy. And so I'm taking everything you're telling me, and I think expectations are key. And I think definitely prices have to eventually go up because I'm in my 5th year now. So I feel like I have a process and all that. But there is a sweet spot there of people that still need help and can't pay an X amount of dollars for branding. So I feel like if I can streamline that process and they're willing to work with me and they're not that needy client, because no matter how much anyone pays you, you never want that type of client. I feel like that's my sweet spot right there.
Can I add something to that? Sorry, I just got another for you. So I'm with you. Like COVID has turned all of our lives upside down. And I like the beginning of, Q2, whatever, like lowered my prices to serve the market. And then I brought them back up again. Yep. And like, I say this with my staff, like this is a business, not a life coaching school. Like you're here to do a job. Like you're running a business, you're not running a charity. Like, even though you want to help people, and I have that same heart itch, like I want to help people. So maybe you take those clients that like really can't afford you, and you set like a, that you want to help that have some money, and you sort of set an inventory list of like, okay, I'm going to take 5 clients this quarter that, are in the lower tier bracket, so I can still help people and like serve people, because it's clear you're very heart-centered. but then you have a different sort of criteria for like your core client.
Yep.
And you, instead of having it kind of be like anyone, you know, I don't know if this is helpful, but like,
Yeah, no, I love the tiered approach.
yeah. Yeah.
So
Instead
as
of
I've been able to, and I'll end there because I know this is not by any means a personal session, but I've learned as you meet new clients, and as a business, you have to make money, period. So you do keep on a certain segment tier of clients that you know will kind of almost be there. And then as that's kind of paying the bills and you're growing and everything, you go after that one big guy. And then it becomes 2, and then it becomes 3. And so that's where I'm kind of looking to expand to that more sophisticated client. So it goes exactly with, it aligns exactly with what you just said.
Can I add one thing? I think Jessica nailed it. Brilliant. I love that. I just wanted to say one other thing that's adjacent but not directly related that it could help. I also think the more clarity you get around your own offering in terms of how are you distinguishing yourself in the market? How are you unique? How have you really set yourself apart from your competition and from other folks doing what you do, and really finding that niche, then it becomes a lot easier to market yourself. Because you're not competing against everybody. You're not worried about, so then you don't have to do a price play as much. Like, I agree with everything Jess said. I'm just saying when then things kind of level out and you start to get that, those clients and they start to come into your pipeline, if the only thing that's different between you and the next person is your price, they're going to go for them. If they're cheaper. So you have to also figure out what is it that you're offering and doing that's unique, what is different, what is niche, what's an expertise that you're offering that no one else is. So, I mean, that's a big reason. I mean, we believe in it too. I mean, we're very huge comedy and levity and humor buffs, but as far as we know, we're the first humor-based agency in the world. And that was also very intentional. We wanted a specific type of client to know who to come to when they wanted some sort of positivity, personality, play, levity in their business. And so we marketed ourselves that way. We got niche initially because, and that can be scary to do, but it's paid off long-term because now we're known for something. And I think you have to be known for something, or like Jess had said, or you're known for nothing. So yeah, that'd be the last thing I add. Sorry, I don't mean to be the last voice, but I just wanted to throw that in.
That is all great. Thank you so much for sharing all of these amazing insights. I mean, I personally learned a ton tonight, and I know we're already like 3 minutes like beyond 7 p.m. I'm just gonna go ahead and do the giveaway. So I'm gonna quickly share my screen so everyone can kind of see who's gonna get the 2 giveaways. One second, I'm just gonna share these. I hope I got everyone's name here already. All right, so I'm just gonna quickly spin and see who's gonna win for the first one.
I can hear the Wheel of Fortune sounds in my head.
I know, right? All right, Jocelyn for the first one.
Woo.
All right. And then for the second one, oh. That was like really close. All right. The 2 ladies who actually got those giveaways, please do leave your email. Well, actually, don't leave your email here. I'll reach out to you personally, and then I will send you the giveaways. And honestly, I think that's pretty much what we have for today. I think I'm not going to do virtual selfies. I feel like I got everyone today already in here, and I'll just take a screenshot later. But thank you so much for joining us this evening. This is a wonderful session, and Lauren, amazing moderator as always. Ali, thank you so much. Jessica, you're amazing. Thank you for sharing all those amazing insights. And yeah, if you want to leave your LinkedIn information here, feel free to do so. I think a couple of other people already drop in their LinkedIn as well. Feel free to connect, and always reach out and let us know if there are any other questions that you have along the way, and any other questions around branding. Reach out to these amazing ladies who already know like all things around branding and can give you a ton of advice around those. And I don't think I have anything else. Lauren, anything else you want to say before we kind of like fully wrap up everything?
No, I think this was a great session. Another great year.
Yes, definitely. You are very welcome. We'll hope to see you again maybe next year. I don't know if it's going to be virtual or in person. We'll definitely see which one's going to work best for everyone. Okay? Have a
Thanks,
wonderful
everyone.
evening, ladies.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.